I'm not going to lie to you guys. This one's going to be hard to get through. It's probably going to be entertaining for you guys because I will most likely get very worked up while talking about this book. But I've put off recording this video for long enough. I do need to talk about this book. I've seen quite a few people on YouTube talk about this already during Cimmerian September. But I just don't think any of them have truly articulated just how awful this book is. As you can see, I did show off this copy of Conan the Avenger in a recent short where I showed the cover falling off. And that was before I started reading it. After I had read this book, I was so angry, so blindingly angry, that I threw this book across the room. It bounced off a wall, and the page, the spine cracked in half, and pages started falling all over the place. I had to pick it up and cobble it back together so I could show it off for this video. Yeah, this book, it sapped my will to live. It really did. I'm not going to bury the lead. It gets a 1 out of 5. And you know what? It barely deserves even that. It is just a humongous piece of garbage. And that's ironic because it's a very short novel. But I won't tease you guys anymore. We'll start the intro. Oh gosh, I need something to calm my nerves. Earl Grey. It's good stuff. Conan the Avenger. Originally written by Bjorn Nyberg, a Swedish writer, and I put that word in air quotations because, well, you'll see. Nyberg was apparently a big fan of Robert E. Howard's Conan stories and decided that he wanted to write his own sequel to the Howard novel The Hour of the Dragon. He also decided to write the entire thing in English, even though he didn't speak English. Off to a great start, aren't we, folks? Nevertheless, Nyberg finished the manuscript and turned it over to his friend L. Sprague-de-Camp, who translated Nyberg's rambling, broken English into something a little more readable and had it published in 1957 by Gnome Press under the title The Return of Conan. Later in 1968, he reprinted it as part of Lancer Books' Conan paperback series under the new title Conan the Avenger. And then in 2024, this big idiot bought a copy of it and added it to his collection with all his other Conan books because he's stupid. I think the best way for me to talk about this book and explain just how bad it really is to walk through the story beat by beat and really show you guys what we're working with here. Now, like I said, this is a sequel to The Hour of the Dragon. It picks up exactly where that novel left off. Conan has just saved the world from the evil wizard Zoltoten. He has crushed the rebellion that rose up against him and tried to overthrow his kingdom of Aquilonia. And he has married the slave girl Zenobia, who saved his life during the events of that book, and he's made her his queen. And so at the beginning of this book, Conan and Zenobia are newly married. They are throwing this big party at their palace in Aquilonia. All the nobles are there. They're drinking and feasting and having a great time. And at one point, Zenobia pushes through the crowd and tries to get some fresh air by going out onto the balcony. And she is immediately kidnapped by this monster. This big winged bat thing. It just swoops down out of nowhere, scoops her up, and takes off into the sky. And Conan sees this and he thinks, oh, great. Time for another adventure. I guess I got to go rescue my wife. And so he tears this sword off of the wall, pushes his way through the crowd, and he leaves the kingdom in the hands of Prospero and Trocero, as per usual. I feel so bad for those guys. Anytime Conan goes on an adventure, they have to handle things back home. But yeah, he leaves the kingdom in their hands, and he heads off into the east to find the one person that he thinks can help him find his missing wife, and that is the wizard Pelias. Now, Pelias is a character from the short story, The Scarlet Citadel. And the way that Robert E. Howard characterized him, I don't think he'd be willing to help Conan out, because Pelias is not a nice guy. He's not a nice wizard. In fact, he's a necromancer. And the only reason that he and Conan worked together in the Scarlet Citadel was because they had an enemy in common, and they were both working with each other to get revenge. And at the end of that story, Conan basically says, I want nothing to do with wizards anymore. But here he goes off into the east to find Pelias' stronghold. He eventually finds it, and he walks in, and Pelias is immediately like, hey, Conan, how's it going? I've been waiting for you. Here, have a seat, have a drink. I'm a completely different character than I was last time. And he tells Conan, yes, I can help you find your missing wife. We'll have to use this magic mirror. But in order to do so, you'll have to pray to your god for some reason. And Conan says, well, my god is Crom, but I don't pray to him. And Pelias is like, well, you better, because that's the only way we're going to make this magic mirror work. Again, I don't know why that's the case. And so Conan, he bows his head and he puts his hands together and he says a prayer to Crom. And I touched on this in my previous Conan video. Conan would never pray to Crom. And it's not just because Conan is an agnostic and doesn't care about the gods. You don't pray to Crom in general because he's not that kind of god. He is this grim, uncaring deity who he gives human beings strength and endurance and the will to survive at birth. But after that, he wants nothing to do with mortals. If you pray to Crom, he will send you doom and misfortune. Not my words, Robert E. Howard's words. But there he goes. Conan just prays to Crom like he did in the movie. I know that scene's awesome. You know, if you do not listen, then to hell with you. It's a great scene, but it's just not Conan. The actual Conan would not do that. But he prays to Crom, and sure enough, he sees a vision of his wife's kidnapper in the mirror. And he finds out that far off to the eastern Proto-Asian nation of Kitai, there is an evil wizard named Ya Cheng. The villain of this story is a Chinese wizard named Ya Cheng. It gets so much worse, you guys. So Conan pushes further east towards Kitai to find his wife and the man who kidnapped her. In order to get to Kitai, he must first pass through the nation of Turan. Now, while he's traveling through Turan, he is accosted by minions of King Yezdegerd of Turan. And Yezdegerd wants revenge on Conan because Conan, at some point in the past, stirred up rebellion against Yezdegerd's father, the former king. I don't know. I don't really care. The point is, he has it out for Conan, and in this really stupid, out-of-character moment for Conan, he kind of bumbles into this trap set by Yezdegerd's minions, and so they capture him and take him into the Turanian royal court. And during this section of the novel, Bjorn Nyberg keeps referring to the Turanians as Hyrcanians. He refers to them as Turanians sometimes, but more often than not, he calls them Hyrcanians. And while that is technically correct, it's just not... Look, okay, we're going to have a good old-fashioned Hyborian Age history lesson, boys and girls. Professor Tim's going to tell you what's what. And we're going to use this map of the Hyborian Age kingdoms from my copy of the Conan Chronicles by Robert Jordan. This very nice black and white map, very detailed layout of the Hyborian Age. Now, as you can see, here is Hyrcania. Then we have the Sea of Viliette, and on the other side is Turan. Now, Turan is a province of Hyrcania. It's a vassal state of the Hyrcanian Empire. But you wouldn't exactly call a Turanian a Hyrcanian, in the same way you wouldn't call a Scotsman an Englishman just because his country is a part of the British Empire. You could, but it would be very offensive to the Scotsman, and it's just also not really factual. I mean, technically it is, but you know what I'm saying, okay? Not only that, Nyberg insists that the nations of Shem and Brithunia are also vassal states of the Hyrcanian Empire. Now look, here is Shem, and here is Brithunia. Notice that there is a huge swath of desert, a range of mountains, and also the nation of Zamora between the Hyrcanian Empire and those countries. Not only that, at this time in the Hyborian Age's history, both Shem and Brithunia are vassal states of the Aquilonian Empire, which means that they are Conan's subjects at this point. I don't know how you get it that wrong, because it's laid out in Robert E. Howard's Hyborian Age essay, his own personal layout of the history of the Hyborian Age. I know this because I've read it multiple times. Now, to be fair, there was a point in the history of the Hyborian Age where Shem and Brithunia were under the thumb of the Hyrcanian Empire, but that wasn't until 500 years after the time of Conan. And I know that because not only did I read the Hyborian Age history, I also cross-referenced it with this portion of the essay that was included in Conan the Avenger. Now, this portion actually discusses the time after Conan's rule when Shem and Brithunia were part of the Hyrcanian Empire. And at the very beginning, it says, in the very first paragraph, 500 years later, that is after the rule of Conan the Great. And look whose initial we have as a citation for that note. De Camp. So not only did L. Sprague de Camp know that Bjorn Nyberg was totally wrong about the history and geography of the Hyborian Age, he also didn't edit those mistakes out of the story. He also included a portion of Robert E. Howard's essay that proved that Bjorn Nyberg was full of crap. Truly, there was no end to the depths of pretentious hack writing that L. Sprague de Camp would sink.
Why are you the way that you are? Honestly, every time I try to do something fun or exciting, you make it not that way. I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
I wish I could say that we're moving on into a better section of the story, but that's simply not true. It keeps getting worse from here on out. So when he is brought before King Yezdegerd, Conan catches the eye of one of Yezdegerd's mercenaries, who turns out to be an old friend of Conan. He's an old mercenary buddy who fought alongside Conan when they were traveling through Nordheim. And that actually happens a lot in this story. Conan keeps bumping into old friends of his who happen to be there at just the right time and help him out at these really convenient moments. And there's even one part where he bumps into an old girlfriend and they sleep together. Even though I thought Conan was supposed to be faithful to his new queen, but I guess Conan will do what Conan will do. But that kind of thing happens over and over again. He keeps coming across these people that he knew from past adventures, and they keep helping him out at the most opportune moments. And so this guy from Nordheim frees Conan, and they escape the castle. They jump into the ocean, and they take this, they hijack this fishing boat and take off into the Viliette Sea. And Yezdegerd marshals some ships together to sail after them and recapture them. And so while they're sailing across the Viliette Sea, Conan and his Nordheimer friend, they come across a pirate ship. And of course, all the pirates are also old friends of Conan. They were sailing with him when Conan was a pirate captain way back in the day. And their current captain doesn't like Conan. They have a duel, and Conan kills him, because of course he does. And so he assumes control of this pirate crew. And later, they have this big naval battle between Conan's crew and the crew of Yezdegerd's ships. And Conan makes quick work of their ships, and he kills Yezdegerd, because of course he does. And after that, only then does he realize, oh hey, I was doing something, wasn't I? Oh yeah, I have to go rescue my wife.
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it.
So he has the pirate crew drop him off on the other end of the Viliette Sea, and he strikes further east. And as he's passing over the mountains in Hyrcania, he gets attacked by this abominable snowman monster who, I forgot to say, Conan has this magic ring. At some point, Pelias gave him a magic ring. I don't know why Conan would accept a magic ring. Conan's supposed to hate magic. He's supposed to hate wizards. But he accepted this magic ring, and the magic in this ring wards off the big Yeti monster from attacking Conan. And he gets away, and it's this really superfluous little vignette that has nothing to do with the rest of the story. But at this point, Conan finally reaches Kitai. He begins exploring the jungles of Kitai, searching for the wizard Ya-Cheng. And this is where everything gets really, really bad. As Conan traverses through the forest, he stumbles upon these two soldiers who are tying a captured Khitan girl to a post in order to sacrifice her to a dragon. And Conan kills both of these guys. He saves the girl, but then the dragon shows up, so he has to fight the dragon. And Bjorn Nyberg describes this thing this way. This was one of the most formidable antagonists he had ever faced. Armored knights, sword-swinging warriors, bloodthirsty carnivores, and skulking poisoners all were dwarfed by the menace of the giant engine of destruction rushing upon him. He kills it on the very next page. I guess it wasn't that formidable now, was it, Bjorn? After Conan kills the dragon, he gets the girl to safety, and when he looks at her, he tells himself, "By Maka, I did not know that they bred women this beautiful in the Yellow Lands." Then later, the two of them end up sleeping together, because of course they did, and Nyberg describes it as, but he recalled the clasp of her hot arms during an hour of rest in the jungle, when she had given him a woman's reward, freely and willingly, in a burst of oriental passion that needed no touch to inflame his desire.
What you've gone and done. Look what you've gone and done here. For God's sake, you're a bunch of degenerates.
After that casual little bit of racism, Conan takes the girl to her village, and there he meets the girl's father, who is the elder of the village. And he tells Conan, "We've actually been expecting you, because we've been under the oppressive thumb of the wizard Ya Cheng for a long time. And long ago, my wife, who is clairvoyant, she had a vision of the future and told us that one day a white-skinned savior from the West would come and save our people." So not only is Conan a chosen one in this story, he's a white savior as well. Okay, I'm just going to rush to the end of this story here. So Conan helps the people revolt against Ya Cheng, and they help him get into the castle with his plan that really doesn't make all that much sense. And while he's skulking around the castle, he goes to the dungeon, and he opens up one of the cells and finds another old friend of his inside. It's another mercenary friend of his who's like, "Hey, Conan, what's going on?" And he's like, "Hey, I'm trying to overthrow this evil wizard and save my wife. Would you like to help the rebels overthrow the army outside?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'll go help them." And so he runs off to help the rebels storm the castle. And Conan makes his way towards the inner sanctum. And before he does, he's attacked by that big bat creature that captured Zenobia at the beginning of the story. And he also kills it really quickly. Why me worry? Conan's strongest there is! Then Conan finally makes it into the wizard's chamber, and he bursts into the room, and he sees the wizard holding up a dagger above his wife, Zenobia, who is stretched out on this stone slab, ready to be sacrificed. And the wizard casts his spells and surrounds Conan with these conjured demons and shadow monsters. And then this happens. Then he seemed to see, superimposed on the grinning and slavering waifs of darkness, the picture of a great hall. Giant logs were its walls, and the rafters were as thick as 4 men, but gloom pervaded it. Dark and somber men in gray mail stood about a throne, and upon the throne sat a black-haired king, tall and moody, with black eyes and an austere and merciless face. And when I read that part, I stared at the page for a couple seconds and thought, no, they wouldn't. But they do. And the voice of the king reached out to his mind. "Man of Cimmeria, you are a son of Crom, and he will not let you suffer eternal damnation. You have always been true to him in your heart, and the black arms of the east shall not have your soul." The dark eyes of the god burned. He stretched out his powerful hand, and a great light burst from it. With the light, Conan felt all his old power surge back into his body. The blue mist thinned and curled away. The demons departed in chattering fear and frenzy, and the king of Aquilonia strode forward unhindered. So, not only is Crom okay with being prayed to now, but if you're a good little Cimmerian who worships Crom, he will reach down from heaven, give you a nice little pat on the head, call you a good boy, and give you a shiny Dragon Ball Z Kaioken power-up so you can fight the bad guys. This was a mistake. This reading event was a mistake, Michael. So now that he has his sparkly Kaioken power-up, Conan bursts through all the demons, and he attacks Ya Cheng, he kills him, and he takes back his wife. And this is the last thing we read in the last chapter of the book. As the victorious host came shouting and cheering through the door, they found him embracing his lovely queen with all the ardor of a man in love for the first time. And then Conan sacrificed to Crom, god of the black-haired Cimmerian race. I know this is going to bring down the goofy tone of this review, but I need to point out just how important Conan is to me and why Conan and Robert E. Howard's writings in general are important to me. I found Robert E. Howard's stories in my early 20s when I was in a very dark and angry and scary part of my life. There was a lot of family drama going on. There was a lot of drama with my friends going on. I won't get into details, obviously, but there was some of the typical, people move out of state, they get married, they have kids, they just drift apart, that kind of thing. But there were there were times where friends of mine just didn't want to talk to me anymore because of some misunderstanding or something that someone had told them about me that obviously wasn't true. And because of this, I was in a really depressive state at the time. And because of that, my creativity really suffered. I was not writing a lot, and I was not reading a lot. And because I wasn't reading, I wasn't writing either. There was about a year and a half where I never read a single book. I probably read some comics or some manga, but I don't really count any of those because they're really easy to read. They don't really require a lot of attention or effort. But I hadn't read a book in almost a year and a half. And so, because I wasn't reading, I wasn't writing either. My creative drive had been squashed by a combination of my depression and the fact that I wasn't giving myself what I needed to think creatively. And at the time, I was working this little dead-end job. I was working at a bagel shop in the inner city, and right across the street was a Barnes & Noble. And after work, I would spend like 15 or 20 minutes in there every day. And one of these times, I found a copy of The Coming of Conan the Cimmerian. So I picked up that book, and I started flipping through it. And I fell in love with Robert E. Howard's writing and his Conan stories and the world that he created. And I bought that book and I took it home and I finished all those stories within the next couple days. And once again, I had that spark of creativity. I had this overwhelming feeling of wanting to create my own worlds and create my own stories. And I hadn't felt that in a long, long time. And about a year and a half later, I had collected a bunch of my stories into a collection, a compilation, you could say. And I published that. I self-published it as my first book, Salamander Shall Kindle. And so, without Robert E. Howard and without Conan, I don't think that would have happened. And the more that I learned about Robert E. Howard, his life, and his mindset, and his feelings in the days right before he took his own life, it really scared me to think that there was a time in my life, right before I found his writing, where he and I were in very similar situations. Now, I've never been suicidal. I've never had those thoughts or tendencies, but I could recognize the kind of stuff that he was going through. And I read about this guy and his life, and I saw so many parallels between his life and mine, and it made me really sad to think that this guy, who is a lot like me, felt so hopeless and chose the end that he gave himself. And it made me realize how good my life was in comparison. And so the thing is, I read those old Conan stories over and over. And then I read things like this, these pastiche novels by much less talented writers. And I see a kind of parallel between that kind of stuff and the stuff that's going on with the stories that we love nowadays. I see parallels between Conan the Avenger and all the stuff that's going on with Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and all those other stories that we love so much. And they're being taken over by these very untalented writers and directors who think they know what they're doing, and they're really not. But if I've learned anything from the videos that I've put up on this channel, especially the Conan videos, it's that people are still engaging with those old stories, and that people still remember those old stories. People are still reading Robert E. Howard's original Conan stories. In the same way, people are still discovering the original Star Wars trilogy, or they're still reading Lord of the Rings for the first time. And it gives me a little bit of hope, because it's made me realize that no matter what these hack writers and these hack directors do to the stories we love, the original creativity is always going to shine through, and people are always going to find their way back to the real stuff, the stuff that really matters. And so 50, 60 years from now, I have no doubt that people will still be reading Robert E. Howard's fiction. I doubt they'll be reading Bjorn Nyberg's and L. Sprague de Camp's. So that's something to think about. So I'm sorry to have brought the mood down, but I felt like that needed to be said. I hope you guys will continue to read Robert E. Howard's work and really celebrate the writing of a very talented author and a man who shuffled off of this world way before his time. Happy Cimmerian September, everybody. Until next time, as always, farewell, keep reading.
You did not have to do that. You knew you did not have to do that. How could you have done that?